All right, guys, today, apparently, I'm going to be more of a shill for Wixwell, and guess Plarium's paying me is something what I've seen a lot of people saying, that it feels like content creators are forced to make Fusion sound good, and I'm really not sure what Plarium would be giving me, honestly, but if they did give me something, I would very much appreciate it. But in reality, I'm not trying to say you have to go for this champion because he's going to be game-changing. What I'm trying to say is, don't listen to people saying that he's bad and skip him. Look at why he would be bad for your account, okay? And for some players, this is an easy skip, of course, right? Like, I don't need to use him in my account. I'm not going to use him for Hydra, but that doesn't mean that somebody out there could use this champion for Hydra and do amazing with it. So what I want to do for you all, those of you who could actually get benefit from this champion, is give you some ideas with teams you could use on Hydra to make a full auto, one key Nightmare Hydra team that does a lot more than 25 million damage like yesterday's video. That wasn't a damage showcase whatsoever, but this one is going to do 165 million damage, full auto Nightmare Hydra. So if you times that by the 4 that you get, I think, from the multiplier from the first key for Hydra Clash, that's 660 million Hydra Clash points, which I believe basically maxes out that top chest for Hydra Clash. So the team that I used is right here. Now, before people say, okay, well, I don't have Duchess, I don't have Necmo, so on and so forth, I want to go through and explain the role of each champion. So if you're somebody who's looking to push Hydra damage, this could be a video for you. I'm going to explain also why Wixwell is so good in this team and why he's actually pretty difficult to replace. So I will click through the video. Let's go ahead and start from the beginning. This video was 100% full auto. I was walked away. I was actually on the way to a movie theater with my kids yesterday, watched Kung Fu Panda 4, and I was checking in at the very end from TeamViewer, which is a desktop remote PC app, and I actually could have pushed this, I believe, to 200 million plus if I would have manualed it, but I absolutely cannot stand manual Hydra, so I don't do that. The reason why the run failed is because Newt here, right before the Head of Suffering, swallows Michinaki or gets him. Guess what Newt does? I could have manualed him and used his A3 manually, but instead I didn't do that because I've got to stick to my honesty of being, okay, 100% full auto. I clicked the Head of Suffering. Newt did the A3. There's a one turn literally before Michinaki got 8. I knew it was going to happen. That's perfectly fine. The run went ahead and ended around 165 million. I did click a few heads throughout the run, very seldomly, basically. Like you can see random times throughout the match, there's no heads being clicked. So like I said, I was away. But when I check in, I would see, okay, well, this head's eating a champion. Let's go ahead and click this head. But it's a relatively quick run as well. So if you do want to do the head clicking, it's really not going to last that long because we don't have Inquisitor Shamel. Now, looking at it from the beginning, let's see how the run actually starts. So that one I had to restart because I did not have the presets correct. So we're going to go to this one right here. So the very beginning, we have Wixwell starting off with his A1 ability on the Head of Decay. I do click that one because you do want to do some clicking of the heads to actually make sure that the A1 opens up with the provoke on the Head of Decay. So after that, you don't have to continually click it because he should be having the counterattacks happen. And when he counterattacks, he's going to reapply the provoke. So something I was worried about is having to manual the provoke. I don't want to manual target the whole time, but if you click, that's okay. I don't personally mind to click every now and then, but I don't like turning it off auto and doing any selection of skills whatsoever in Hydra runs. I like to get as much damage possible as I can through that. So you can see here the few roles that Wixwell is doing. He's placing the shield, which is actually a pretty reasonable shield. The shield growth is pretty pitiful, but that's beside the point. I think the shield itself is significant and is a pretty big help, honestly. Now, the Head of Mischief on the far right is something you want to pay attention to because that head is going to be hitting Wixwell, hopefully every single time, since Wixwell has not only intercept, but also counterattack, which, speaking of, this is one team, one of the only teams actually, where I've turned on Newt's A2 ability. Now this is huge because it's difficult oftentimes to get a champion who brings weaken as well as decreased defense and make all the other roles get filled. Well, Newt brings a weaken, but he also brings a counterattack on himself. So oftentimes what happens is he does the A2 ability, he places the weaken, but then he gets counterattack on himself, which means if the Head of Mischief steals it, well, he's probably going to because I don't have very much resistance on my Newt. Well, the Head of Mischief is going to spread it to everybody, and all the heads having counterattack is absolutely terrible. So what I have here is since Wixwell places counterattack every single turn, which allows you to build him fast as a Mischief tank, which is something you often don't get to do. Typically, Mischief tanks are pretty slow, but Wixwell is actually fast and in Relentless gear. He can have Newt still using his A2 ability, and everything's going to go pretty smooth. So the Head of Mischief continually hitting Wixwell. Of course, every now and then, it does steal the buffs, but that's why I have 2 buff strip champions. We have Wukong, which is a free champion, and then have Michinaki. If you don't have Michinaki, that's okay. You can go with different champions if you're just trying to get the 1 key damage. Michinaki does do a ton of damage, and you'll see that at the end of the run. But if you can get him in, definitely worth doing. He brings a decreased defense AoE, brings a strip, brings some Hex, which I have Necmo and Curse set as well, so we have plenty of Hex up the whole time. It's really good to have a Hex set alongside Michinaki because Michinaki joins in on attacks that have Hex applied, so more Hex, the better. But you can see through this fight, the 2 things we're looking at right here is the Head of Decay being controlled, consistent provoke, and the Head of Mischief consistently attacking Wixwell. Now, of course, it's not going to happen flawlessly the entire time. There's going to be some parts where the run breaks down, but in general, this is super consistent. Now, we do have Duchess here for the Perfect Veil, but Duchess is not needed. You could use Rector Drath, you could use various different champions. The new Glycad champion, whatever his name is, you could use Feral, because these champions in this team are all tanky, right? So we have Newt, who's a defense-based champion. We have Michinaki, who's defense-based champion. We have Sun Wukong, who reses himself. Necmo, who's pretty tanky, but he could also be a different champion. I'll go over that in just a moment. But all these champions are tanky. Wixwell brings increased defense, which is going to make him more tanky, but also increase the damage from Newt as well as Michinaki. So your team becomes very sustainable without having the need for Duchess. So I could use a Rector Drath, may not do as good because Rector Drath isn't Duchess and doesn't get the increased attack, but I could also use a Feral, which maybe even does better. I could use the Glycad. Anybody who does a Perfect Veil will probably work in this team and probably do fine. So when it comes to full auto stuff, sometimes the difficulty is targeting these heads, and since this head does the fear all the time, something to be worried about is, okay, even when Veil drops, it happens a lot with Duchess. The Veil will drop, and then you'll have fear get placed on your champions, and sometimes it's hard to free champions like that. But since we have Intercept on basically everybody, and Intercept doesn't go away if you have Veil on. So whenever, say, Wukong over here, for example, takes his next turn, he's going to hit somebody, and in a typical world, or same thing with Michinaki. In a typical situation, Michinaki does an AoE hit, and he's going to get feared because he has no Veil. But since he has the Intercept, it's going to wait until he either gets provoked or he takes a fear, and it's just going to drop 1 stack. It's not going to go, no stacks are going to decrease until Michinaki does the fear, or gets feared, or gets provoked. So he's about to take a turn. You should be able to see it in just a moment. And Michinaki is a great one to have this on because he's constantly joining in on attacks, whether it's on the Head of Torment, wherever it is, he's joining in attacks, has a high chance of getting feared. In just a moment, you should see this. He should drop a stack because he should hopefully be doing an AoE. Okay, no, he gets reapplied the Veil from Duchess. Unfortunately, we didn't get to showcase it just then, but you can see it on different champions. Okay, the Intercept stays up the entire time until they get the actual debuff, where then it will actually drop. So it's good to have champions like Duchess, champions who bring block debuffs to prevent the provokes from coming through, to save the Intercept stacks for the Head of Torment. And Wixwell will go from top to bottom. He'll go in the order from, okay, we have Wixwell, Sun Wukong, Duchess, Necmo, Newt, and then Michinaki. You could change these orders up to whatever champion you know you want to prioritize to not get feared. Maybe your Newt, you never want him to take a fear, so put him up towards the top. Maybe he's in Relentless, so he takes a lot of turns, breaks the Veil pretty often, so get him up pretty close to the front, and he's going to take the fear less often because he's going to get the priority for the Intercept buff. And then maybe your Duchess, you don't really care about her because she's single target, and you're just going to single target the heads that are not the Head of Torment. So you could just put her towards the back. You could put Necmo at a different spot. I mean, he's going to be doing a lot of turns as well. So maybe put him up close because he takes those extra turns, breaks the Veil pretty often. Whereas Michinaki, for me, he is in lethal gear. Maybe you don't need the Veil whatsoever. So since you saw some of that team, I want to show you guys a team with Rector Drath. So before I get into showcasing the teams, I want to jump in and talk about Wixwell's build. So currently I have him in Relentless plus Perception. Now, if you're somebody out there who cannot hit these stats, prioritize getting Resistance for Mischief Tank, Accuracy to provoke the Head of Decay, plus place your decreased attack and all that kind of stuff, and then work on speed. If you can hit those numbers, then start looking at different sets. Look at Reflex, look at Merciless, look at Relentless. Any extra set you can get is going to be better. So try to fit those in, and then HP and defense in a solid spot. This is not the most important thing. You don't need Relentless on him. I would definitely prioritize having, this is a pretty crazy quad roll. I would definitely prioritize having the stats met before going into the special sets. Because I know some players can be able to hit these numbers fine, and some players just aren't going to be able to hit these numbers. And that's okay. As far as his masteries go, we have War Master. This is a very similar thing. If you can't go the high enough resistance, go Resistance Mastery. You don't need War Master on him. He's going to do a little bit of extra damage, but he's not going to be your main source of damage. So just something to consider, something to keep in mind. He is a pretty stat-heavy champion. depending on what you're wanting to go for. If you're trying to push the highest damage, you're going to need higher sets, higher stats in general. But if you're just trying to do brutal, even hard Hydra, you can go just good speed, 220 plus, with resistance and accuracy, and be pretty well off. So as far as the next champions in the team, let's just take a quick look at them. Michinaki was one of them. So Michinaki's build's right here. He is pretty fast also in Hydra. I'm not going to go into his build too much because it's kind of irrelevant. I'm going to talk about the substitutions you can use a little bit later in this video because there's plenty of options you can use as far as other champions go. Newt, similar thing. He's in this team. You can also use some other substitutions, Husk being a pretty good one, but there are definitely other options you can use. I'm going to show you Duchess as well as Rector Draft. I'm actually going to do a little bit of Rector Draft testing later in this video. This is Newt's build. Doesn't need this much crit damage at all. We have good accuracy on him to actually place the A2 because I do have that turned on in this fight. And then we have Rector here. This is Rector Draft. She has, no, not even Relentless. I thought I had 4-piece Relentless. I actually don't. So when you see her being ran in the video later on, this is her build being used. So she's relatively fast. Relentless boots would fix everything though. Either way, it's fine. She's okay. Not a big deal. For Duchess, this Duchess is the one I use, I believe. So it's the Stone Skin Duchess, which isn't doing much for Hydra necessarily. No extra benefits, no Relentless, nothing like that. The Reflex one would be better for more uptime on the Veil, but this is okay. I mean, it's PvP Duchess, so it's fine. And then we have Wukong and Nekmo. So Wukong is right here just real quick. And then Nekmo could be Eostrid, could be various different champions. Doesn't have to be Nekmo. I don't have Eostrid. I missed her fusion, unfortunately. This is Wukong's build. And then we have Nekmo over here. So if it's Eostrid, maybe get a special set on her. Having extra hex sets is always good because Michinaki joins in on attacks. It helps him out with a little bit more damage overall. Good speed, Slayer, good accuracy and resistance. And overall, he's looking pretty solid. So that's the gear of the champions. Wixwell being the most important here, the one that I'm showcasing. So guys, back to the video. Since I mentioned her being a potential option, I want to see, I haven't tested this yet, which is probably not the best idea, but I have not tested this yet, but I want to show you all that I strongly believe that Duchess is not required. I am going to set Rector Draft's res to number 1. Duchess's res was also number 1. Duchess does bring the benefit that when Sun Wukong dies, she reses everybody, or she reses him and places Veil on everybody, so we got more consistent uptime for the Veil, which is nice to have. But even with this team, I'm going to try to cycle through somebody quickly. Hopefully, maybe not, may go slow, but this team should, well, easily does one key. So Wixwell is bringing the Mischief Targeting. He's bringing the Decay Provoke. He's bringing Decreased Attack. He's bringing Shields, which are pretty nice, honestly, because a big issue with Hydra building full auto teams is having shields or sustain in general, making your team actually stay alive, and Wixwell has that covered. The shield is actually respectable. The shield growth, on the other hand, I didn't even pay attention to that, but if you guys want to see it, let's see where, I don't even know what ability it's on, honestly, because the shield growth mechanic in the game, they've had champions who had the shield growth mechanic that they end up essentially nerfing. We have Brogni, who the rolls with him is essentially nerfed as far as like the Corpulent Cadaver stuff. I couldn't see Plarium releasing a super powerful shield growth champion and for it to really matter, honestly. I wasn't looking forward to that being anything crazy. The shield growth is, this one increases the value of all shields based on the a number of buffs they have. So let's see how much his shield gets boosted up here. It's not very much. So you gotta watch very carefully. Okay, so like nothing. So the shield growth is basically irrelevant. But if you're looking for the shield growth to determine if you're going for this champion or not, well, it's pretty easy to say. It's probably not worth going for this champion. But if you're looking for the other roles that he brings for Hydra, maybe the champion's worth going for. With fusions, I'm much more on the side of trying to convince you all to go for them and not regret skipping them than just skipping them because maybe, well, I even mentioned in my video a few days ago that I thought he was going to be an underwhelming champion, an overhyped. And if you don't need him for Hydra, he still is, right? Like he's still, not overhyped, just not needed for your account necessarily. If your Hydra teams are good, which my Hydra teams are good, I'm going to go for him just because I'm going to play the game. I'm going to be doing the events, assuming the fusion's not super difficult. I have no reason to skip the guy, but if I was hard off on resources, I wouldn't be spending to go for him because on my account, also content creator, a little bit different stuff there. But if I was not a content creator, then and I have my current stuff, he's not going to bring anything to my account, right? Like my Nightmare team, I'm going to try to get my Obero into my Nightmare team and I actually tested out a few days ago and she did 200 million, I think, maybe 250. I could definitely get her to probably 500 million if I can get a team working. So that's the team I'm going to be using on Nightmare Hydra. So I don't need him on that. I'm not worried about a 160 million damage team, but 160 million damage, I know of probably 3 to 5 players personally off the top of my head right now who have all these champions who could get the value from Wixwell and basically double their Hydra damage because of this team. Now, Wixwell in this team is a little bit difficult to replace because a lot of the champions who bring increased defense they take up a spot and they don't bring a provoke, they don't bring a ability to mischief tank. So you're thinking of champions like Mithrala. She brings great stuff, but it changes the team composition quite a bit. Champions like Siphi, she brings a res, but doesn't bring the other stuff I'm talking about. We have champions who bring increased defense, but a lot of them don't bring increased defense, but also make the other roles make sense. And this team really just meshes together very well, I believe. So you can see right here, Nekmo has a provoke on him. We also have the Veil as well. Almost at 1 key damage already. Now, of course, this is very early in the fight, 100% full auto, but with Rector Drath, we're still almost at 1 key. And I really don't think it's going to be that much different without Duchess because these other champions, they're not dying. And this team, we have the leeches and everything. Now, once we finish this run, or once I get to a comfortable spot, actually, let's go ahead and talk about some of the champions you can replace. So Sun Wukong, he is essentially here for damage, but really he's really here for the strip plus the block buffs. You need a block buff champion. So if you don't have Wukong, then bring in an Ugo, bring in a Mighty Uko. Any champion who can place block buffs is going to be so helpful. Mighty Uko may be the next best option. Not going to bring damage, but he is going to bring the consistent block buffs. Any champion who brings block buffs is going to fit in Wukong's spot. Rector Drath is a Veil spot, a res spot, an extra support spot. The reason why Veil is because it does help when the intercept is off to actually reapply that Veil so that now your champions can be protected from the fears from the Head of Torment. And then we have Nekmothar. This champion could be Eostrid. I strongly believe that. He is bringing increased speed plus decreased speed. If you fit in increased speed or decreased speed somewhere else in your team, then you could drop him. But Eostrid, or however you say your name, brings an AoE decreased speed, brings an AoE increased speed as well as a weaken somewhere in her kit, plus an increased attack. So in this kind of team where I don't have Duchess and I have no increased attack for Sun Wukong, then Eostrid would actually be probably better than Nekmo. Now, the leech is dropped, but the good thing is that even with the leech being dropped, we still have a lot of heals coming from Rector Drath, actually more heals than Duchess gives. And then for Newt's spot, he's just a defense-based champion who does max HP damage, which is pretty incredible. He does a lot of damage, but to be honest, if you had a different defense-based champion, or even a tanky or possibly survivable attack-based champion could be fine. You just got to know that the champion here, since we don't have a AoE res champion, it's a single target res champion, you really want the person in this spot to survive. But it could be somebody like Harima. If you had Harima, it could be various different defense-based champions, or if you had some survivable, like I said, attack-based champions. It could even be a Husk. Husk could work pretty good in this spot. I think Newt beats out Husk, but Husk could work very well because he is more tanky than, say, a Royal Guard, for example. And then for Michinaki's spot, Michinaki is just a somewhat of a flex damage dealer spot, but he also brings the strip, the extra strip, and the hex. So he's a very good high damage dealing champion. But if you don't have a Michinaki, similar thing with Newt, I believe a Husk could fit in there. You may have to get more creative with your other champions. You may have to throw on a hex set somewhere else, so on and so forth. But I do believe Michinaki could be replaced and could be fine. You just got to be more creative about what you actually do. Now, if Michinaki's dropped, you do need an increase or a decreased defense debuff because that will make your damage significantly different with or without it. So without Michinaki, gotta be careful. Make sure you get the increased defense buff up, or decreased defense. Have increased defense on him, have decreased defense on the enemies, and you should be doing pretty good, right? So right now we are getting more of the Veil, the True Fears on us, but he's continually placing the intercept. So where's the intercept? Intercept, intercept, intercept. Now with Rector Drath, I don't really need her to have intercept because she could be targeting anything else other than this Head of Torment. For some reason, she's targeting the Head of Torment and getting the fears. But now it goes down and we get the fears cleansed. So the Head of Torment, while it's still getting the fears through, of course, because Wixwell isn't placing intercept on everybody, it's not getting as many fears through as it would if we just had Rector Drath or if we just had Duchess. So Wixwell is doing well there. He's not the only answer for Head of Torment, I don't believe. Like, he's nowhere near the level of Shamel as far as answering the Head of Torment. You can't necessarily easily rely on him to prevent the fears all the time, but it is something that, hey, if you have one of these Veil champions, you can definitely use Wixwell plus the Veil champion, and rest assured that you should be safe from the fear majority of the time. And at least when it really counts, you can pretty much rely on it. And if you have to manual it, you could turn it off, turn him off, manually cast it like a Newt to make sure he doesn't get feared when you're about to kill the Head of Torment, whatever it may be. But right now, just in talking through this, we've already done almost 1 key Nightmare Hydra with Rector Drath not changing anything whatsoever, not going fully optimal. Like I said, we could probably get in Eostra for the increased attack, all kinds of stuff we could actually do to change this up some. Nekmo is an amazing champion. Don't get me wrong. He's absolutely incredible, brings so much stuff to this team, but we could definitely find replacements for him, and it's not going to be impossible to do. Unfortunately, this head gets the Poison Cloud. Wukong apparently wasn't placing enough block buffs, sadly enough, but we are going to down this without too much of an issue and come up to 1 key damage. So, all right, guys, so there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed that video. Let me know what you think about Wixwell. Let me know if you're going to go for him. Let me know if you want to see anything else tested with him. I believe he's a very solid champion for some players out there, and for others, he can be a skip potentially, because I think Hydra is going to be the main area of focus for him. If Sand Devil or Shogun gets changed in a way where Intercept becomes amazing, possibly he could be used there. But for now, I believe Hydra is going to be his main shining point, and I think he works very well, honestly. He works very well, I believe. Now, could you get this damage with different champions? I'm sure you could, but full auto, he fits into this team flawlessly enough that I can safely recommend, hey, if you're working towards Hydra Nightmare, you have similar champions to these, you can make a team like this work, and you don't have this kind of damage, hey, maybe this could work out great for you. So guys, I love and appreciate all of you. Best of luck. Let me know what you're doing. Let me know what your thoughts are down below, and I'll catch you in the next video.